everyone, my name is Shruti, and just this year I was lucky enough to receive a raw study score of 50 for Health and Human Development, or as some of you guys may like to call it, HHD. I genuinely believe anybody can score 50 in HHD. I didn't have a tutor the whole year and I did drop about 10 marks in the exam. So if you guys are willing to put in the effort and you try to take on some of the tips that I'm going to give you guys in this video, I'm sure you guys will ace it. So without further ado, here are my top 5 tips to score a 50 or a 45 plus in HHD. Tip number 1 is about organization. So I would recommend that you guys stay organized from the very beginning of the year. It's always a good idea to separate your notes from practice exams. I would recommend you guys have 2 binders or 2 notebooks. The first notebook should probably be for notes, mind maps, summaries, any condensed version of the course or the study design, all kept in one place. Yeah. The second one should be for practice exams and practice questions throughout the year. When you go to a VCE exam and you open it and you want to do a question, do it in that notebook and ensure that the answers that you put in that notebook, in the practice exam notebook, are to model response. Essentially, throughout the year, have one notebook where all of your notes, everything is condensed into one place. So for instance, if you have a look at this, I would do a lot of tables. I was a table girl. I used to love doing blurting or summaries in the form of really well constructed and well organized tables. So I will give you guys an example here. For instance, my notes would look like this. Yeah, it's a table and it's on both sides. So pretty much all of my notes would be condensed into one single place, one single book, and I would memorize just from this. My second notebook, which was for practice exams, would look like this. Pretty much I would go onto the VCA website, I would do any questions that I got wrong, redo questions that I got wrong or I missed marks on, or essentially I didn't like or I wasn't happy with in this particular book. So now, by the end of the year, I had a perfect examiner response notebook where every single answer was to an examiner standard, and pretty much I knew exactly what to do by having learnt and memorized and studied this particular notebook. Tip number 2, learn your task words. Let me repeat that. Learn your task words or command words. Essentially, these words are, at the start of every question for HHD, you will notice they ask you something like explain the Ottawa Charter, explain or justify or state, describe is a very common one. Explain and describe are very common ones, but those are called task words. And essentially, you need to know what each task word means and what they are asking you to do, what the examiner expects from you. So for instance, if the question asks you justify the advantages and disadvantages of the Ottawa Charter and whether you think that is a good system. Let's say that's the question, right? Justify the advantages and disadvantages of the Ottawa Charter. This basically means that you need to put in the pros and the cons of the Ottawa Charter, and at the end of your answer put in a conclusion or a final statement saying I agree, or the pros outweigh the cons outweigh the pros, and so the Ottawa Charter is so and so. Ensure that you create a list of task words and have their meaning on the side. Use Google Docs to create a table that will help you memorize what each word means and what it's asking you for. For instance, do something like this. Stick it at the front of your notebook and have it handy at any point in time in the year. Now, adding on to that are your health and well-being dimensions. So this is very specific for HHD. At the very beginning of the year, you will learn something called the dimensions, alright? This is pretty much the basis of every single answer in HHD. Every single question will ask you something related to health and well-being. Either you need to relate it to health and well-being or health status or human development, right? That's why it's called health and human development. So what I recommend you guys do is something like this, right? Like what I mentioned before, having a table with every single one of the dimensions, or you guys can use my bubble diagram, which I've linked below in the description. I made a personalized bubble diagram with each and every dimension and each of the aspects, which you should know by heart. Make sure you memorize it, and I'm sure that you guys will be good to go for the rest of the year. Tip number 3 is to work on perfecting your responses. Now, it's natural tendency to think that the extended response, which is the question at the end of the exam, is worth a lot of marks, right? It is worth a lot of marks. It's worth about 10 marks. But in retrospect, actually the extended response is not as important as the rest of your exam. The rest of your exam is about 90 marks. So you need to make sure that you're working on perfecting those responses. If you get a question wrong, give it to your teacher, get feedback, get good feedback from your teacher. Take the feedback, redo the question, give it to your teacher again, and the cycle continues. So I think you guys get what I mean by saying that if you perfect your responses, even losing about 10 or 12 marks in the exam is actually not going to cost you that much, because every single other question is going to be right. For this, make sure you guys look at the VCA website, the official website. Have a look at the examiner's reports on a daily basis. One thing that really helped me is doing 2 questions every single day. Just take an exam, do just 2 questions, don't go more than that. But each question that you do it properly and ensure that you are actually understanding what examiners want from you through reading the examiner's report and seeing how other students have answered that particular question. Alright, my next tip is to ensure that your definitions are all in one place. So I had a book like this. For me personally, I never was a flashcard girl. I used to love writing things down in a book and having them all in one place. So I would do something like this, where all of my definitions throughout the year were in this book. And essentially, I did not have a Quizlet set or physical, tangible flashcards in my hand, but these were essentially my flashcards. So figure out what works for you, but ensure that all your definitions are in one place, because definitions are super important in HHD. They are pretty much your 2-marker questions at the start of the exam, and they're easy marks. So you need to make sure that you have those definitions fully memorized, ready to go. If anybody asks you those definitions, you need to be able to tell them in your sleep pretty much. Finally, tip number 5 is to now focus on the extended response. Focus on the extended response only towards the end of the year. Like I said before, use the whole year to make sure that you're perfecting those minor questions. For instance, those 4 markers, those 6 markers. If you look at last year's exam, 2023 VCA exam, there were so many 6 markers, and there were 6 markers on the most niche topics that pretty much I don't think any HHD student would have expected. So ensure that you have those questions packed down, and then at the end of the year, let's say around August or September, start focusing on the extended response. Do those extended response questions at the end of your textbook. If you are using Jacaranda, ensure that you do those ones at the end of each chapter. There are questions with model answers at the end of each chapter in your Jacaranda textbook. Make sure that you do that. Another really handy thing is to look at the examiner's answers for extended response from company exams. Now, if you know of this website called VCE Rocks, essentially they don't have a lot of resources for HHD, I'm not gonna lie, but they do have some company papers with the examiner's report attached, so you can look at the answers for extended responses and see how past students have answered that question. Throughout the year, make sure that you're doing maybe 1 extended response in a week or in 2 weeks. Just make sure that you're consistent with it and look at the answer and essentially try to model that answer. Use phrases from the examiner's report, show it to your teacher, and see if your teacher actually thinks that is helping you improve your answer. And my final, very last point is to actually enjoy the subject. HHD was my favorite subject throughout year 12. HHD literally is one of the most fascinating subjects if you will actually pay attention to what it's trying to teach you. It's all about the practical world and the Australian healthcare system and etc. So it's actually quite applicable, and it's a really practical subject. So I think if you make sure to put in just a little bit more time and effort than the average person, the average student might, you're actually quite likely to get a decent score in HHD than if you tried your hand at some of the harder subjects. So make sure that you treat it well, put in the effort, and stay consistent with it throughout the year. Don't give up. and I'm sure you guys will do really well. That's it for this video, guys. I hope you liked it. If you did, do make sure to like, share and subscribe to Biologue, and let me know what other video ideas you guys have in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.